Now the LA Chargers, this is interesting because they have $70 million in cap space.
Woo.
The amount of free agents they have: Khalil Mack,
better have
Morgan
more.
Fox, Christian Fulton, Denzel Perriman, Asante Samuel Jr., Poona Ford, J.K. Dobbins, Josh Palmer, Elijah Molden, Tier Tart, Bradley Bozeman, and Joey Bosa. They said they're likely to cut him. That'll open up $25 million. So the Chargers could have
And
upwards to
added $20 million, he said, from the new.
this might be updated to that though. But even if like they're gonna have upwards to $100 million per over the cap, and it's funny because this team just made the playoffs. And when I was looking at their team needs when accounting for free agency, I wrote down center, left guard, right guard, wide receiver, tight end, running back, edge, interior defensive line. They have so many holes, and they just made the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
Like this team was really
what
not
coaching and quarterback
that
can do.
talented at
God
all.
bless you.
Yeah,
Oh,
really just
shit.
quarterback.
Calm down.
What?
Calm down.
Yes, quarterback. Yes,
Oh, no.
Jay Herbo.
I thought you put quarterback for need.
But no, of course not. But of course,
Sure.
like this past season, the Chargers also benefited from a light schedule. You know, they didn't face many 500 teams. I think the only 500 team they beat all season was the Denver Broncos. But they didn't face many top tier competition.
Damn, you might be right.
They did beat us twice.
You might be fucking right.
That's all. You know, you guys mentioned early in the season that a lot of their wins came up against not the best teams, not notable wins.
When we go through the early, like there were first 5 or 6 weeks we were going through because it was them and the Steelers, right?
Yeah,
and
I'm
it was very
double-checking,
similar.
like-
Neither of them played anyone great.
Like they beat the Falcons, they beat the Broncos twice.
They both beat the Falcons.
They
That's
beat
funny
the
part.
Raiders twice.
Their
That's 5
offseason,
wins right
honestly, I just like Jim Harbaugh and Jesse Minter. They're such great defensive minds, right?
Yep.
They're such great that really whoever you bring in on defense, I trust them to figure shit
Absolutely.
out and to just
Damn.
turn out all pro level dudes.
Yeah.
It's really the offense I worry
They
about.
beat your Bengals.
Because
did.
even if you bring in talent, which they will, which they desperately need, right? Like it was Lad McConkey who came on like halfway through the season once he got past some of his injuries. But outside of that, there's nothing there, right? We know how bad this offense is, specifically this wide receiver room and the interior offensive line, which we've talked about, basically all season long. The tackles you feel great about, maybe, best in the league, top 3 in the league in terms of tackle duos. But the interior line could use some help as well as the running back position. I'm still going to worry about Greg Roman. No matter who you bring in at wide receiver, at tight end, at running back, we have seen Greg Roman in the past with Lamar Jackson kind of limit offenses, or at least limit what Lamar Jackson did. I know they were able to produce at a high level and, put up crazy yardage and points, but we have seen that Greg Roman really limited Lamar Jackson in terms of a passer. I think part of that is Lamar just naturally progressing because it was his first couple years in the league. But Greg Roman as an offensive coordinator, as an offensive mind, I feel like in the run game, he's great, right? Like that's what he's known for. He's known for putting together a great rushing attack. And we saw this past year, J.K. Dobbins is coming off back-to-back season-ending injuries with a torn ACL and a torn Achilles. And for the majority of the season, especially before the injury, and even when he got back, he was still good. He was putting up really efficient numbers. I mean, some of the numbers were off the charts of the efficiency levels that he was able to put up. But when you have to get the most out of Justin Herbert to not just make the playoffs, but to compete in this division with the Chiefs, to compete in the AFC with all of the talented head coaches and quarterbacks and defenses that we have there, I worry about what this team's true ceiling will be. Because if Greg Roman's going to be your offensive coordinator, to me, you're going to be limited on offense. We could talk about them bringing in T. Higgins. We could talk about them drafting Luther Burden, Ted McMillan, Tyler Warren, the top offensive minds or offensive weapons you can think of. I still worry about what this offense will be long-term with Greg Roman. I saw it with Baltimore. I have those concerns. But with the money they have, the draft capital they have, like I mentioned, the defense we've seen, and I remember saying this when Harbaugh got hired, that when you have a head coach from college coming to the NFL, those first couple of years, they could hit on draft picks, especially in day 2 and day 3. I think back to Pete Carroll when he went to Seattle, he was able to pick up, Richard Sherman and I forgot what round, sixth round. Like he was able to find guys later in the draft that were Hall of Fame level talents. And you're not expecting that every single draft, but they'll be able to find contributors all throughout this draft.
And that's exactly what happened this past draft.
Yeah.
Joe Alt, Lad McConkey, Tar Heap Still, Cam Hart, and Junior Colson didn't even make an impact this year. Maybe he makes one this upcoming season. They have foundational pieces, but they also have like a lot of holes. So I think like they have to go star hunting in free agency. Like as cliche as that sounds, like they have the cap space. This free agency class isn't really full of like those top end tier 1 guys, but Like the best defensive players on the market, probably Milton Williams and Josh Sweat. And one of those two guys, I think the Chargers end up signing just because of the amount of cap space they have.
Yeah, I think, the Chargers, the way they lost in the playoffs was brutal. They were favorites going into Houston, if I'm not mistaken. And you just went out there and you put up a pretty poor piss performance just from the team in general. I feel like they weren't prepared. They were scared of the moment. But you made the playoffs. That was something for me personally, I didn't expect them to do. Even with the light schedule, I thought other teams would be better. Them getting in, that was a success in itself. Now you have an offseason where you're missing a ton. But like you mentioned, they pretty much aced the draft last year. And they have a lot of contributors, especially in the secondary, a guy on the offensive line. But of course, a wide receiver. But you need more offensive weapons. You need another running back because you can't rely on J.K. Dobbins to be healthy, who he has talked about wanting to come back. You need another wide receiver outside of Ladd McConkey. I know you drafted Brendan Rice. We'll wait and see.
You don't have to wait and see that.
Quentin Johnson,
he's barely played.
Yeah, I'm saying Quentin Johnson, he is not good.
Probably for a reason.
Exactly. Quentin Johnson's not good. You still got to get some good tight ends.
Keyshawn Boutte didn't play.
Oh.
He didn't. He was so much better.
Quentin Johnson, I think, had like 700 yards receiving this year.
No, Quentin Johnson had a pretty successful season for who he is.
Yeah, stats-wise, he played well.
Yeah, Chargers for me, just ace a draft again. Just come in. And I think they do need to go get a player like Milton or Sweat, but I wouldn't hate them going the cheap route. I really wouldn't, because I feel like what Harbaugh has shown us is that he can draft. And if he can draft, he can bring in guys that are much cheaper, that are a lot younger, that bring in that different energy. Wouldn't mind also them going out and paying a Milton Williams because he's like 26, 27. He's actually young. Him and Sweat are not that old. So like they kind of fit
both of them.
Yeah, they kind of fit the timeline of what's going on. So I wouldn't even hate that either. But you need some guys. Khalil Mack had a great year for you last year. You don't know if you're going to bring him back. You got to ace the draft, and I think the Chargers could do that. Because like you mentioned, Chiefs, Broncos are coming up. We'll see with the Raiders. They got a whole new coaching staff. We'll see how they look. You have to be on your P's and your Q's in this type of AFC where it's a wild, wild west. So for them, ace the draft, try to find some cheap routes. But I would throw the bank at Milton Williams. He's that good of a player.
Dells, I'm 100% with you. You can't go into next season with Greg Roman, and it's unfortunate that that's what it's going to end up being. But you have so much money. You have so many different avenues that you can go this offseason with all the draft capital, with all this money that you have in salary cap. Obviously, Jim Harbaugh being at the front of the ship, the captain of the ship, you understand that he's going to put the best team forward. He has the team's best interest at heart. He's going to make the right moves. But Greg Roman as your offensive play caller does worry me because Justin Herbert is so different now than when he was in his second year in the league. I say that where his second year in the league, he was willing to take risks. He was a gunslinger. There was no throw on the field that he can't make, and he saw that, and he let it rip every single time. This past season, it was a more refined approach. And being compared to Aaron Rodgers is always a good thing. This was similar to one of these seasons that Aaron Rodgers has where he has over 20 touchdowns. He barely throws any INTs. He's very safe with the ball. He keeps the possessions for his team. He goes and tries to put points on the board, but his main thing is not turning the ball over. Justin Herbert this season, 3 INTs. Did exactly that for the Chargers, kept them in games, was able to go ahead and lead them to double-digit wins, get them to a playoff berth. But I want to see the Justin Herbert that takes risks. I want to see the Justin Herbert that's not afraid to throw INTs. It's okay. You have one of the best arms in football. I look at Josh Allen. I look at you as the 2 best arms in the game. I genuinely believe that. And, of course, Patrick Mahomes. You can't forget him. But that's the talent that we all see in Herbert. You need to go out there this offseason and ensure that he has the weapons, the offensive line to go ahead and do that. Because he's going to get a ton of criticism, whether fair or not fair, but when you are the quarterback, you are the franchise guy, you're getting record-breaking type money, we want to see results. We want to see stats, whether you want to hear that or not. We want to see the counting stats. But more than anything, we want to see you win a playoff game. We want to see you look good in the playoffs. And in your 2 playoff performances, you blew a 27-0 lead, and you threw 4 INTs in a game that you were favored in. We just need to see a supporting cast around him that we can fairly critique his game. And I think that is what should be the number one goal. I believe in what you're saying, Dels. Greg Roman is going to be a problem. That'll be something that they address next season.
Could be, yeah.
But this season, it's all about putting a great supporting cast around Herbert and letting the rest fall into place.
I feel like Greg Roman was a problem with Baltimore, but last year I thought he was a positive for them. Honestly speaking, like
in the run game when Dobbins was healthy, I agree.
And in both, just Justin Herbert was top 3 in his drop back percentage of play action passes, and I thought that made the game easier for him. I think really he did take a risk. He was top 10 in throws, 10 to 19 air yards down the field, and top 10 in throws, 20 plus air yards down the field as well. So intermediate and deep throws, he was very aggressive.
I feel like that's been a first for Herbert. I don't feel like he takes a shit ton of risks.
Yeah, he was very aggressive. I think the problem is just a supporting cast. If Lad McConkey is your best receiver, I think that's fine if the other receivers around him are actually plus receivers, because I think the playoff game was him being too free and throwing a lot of trust throws, like trusting Quentin Johnson to give him a chance, throwing across the field. Terrible decision, but it's a trust throw, and nobody does that better than Herbert. And there are moments across his regular season where that ended up being like highlight reel plays, and I think that's what's so great about Herbert, that he can make those plays. But it's just about building a supporting cast around him. They have so many holes on this team that I don't even know what their first draft pick is. We've already seen Harbaugh kind of lean with his philosophy towards dudes in the trenches. So I'm guessing his first pick is going to be defensive lineman or offensive lineman. And if that's going to happen, then you need to bring in some tight end talent in the draft, in either day 2 wide receiver talent. And also maybe they just lean towards bringing in offensive linemen through free agency. Like Ryan Kelly, the center from the Colts, is really steady. He's going to be free agent. They could lean towards him. But I think right now it's just Herbert is literally how it stands right now, like with the worst offensive supporting cast in the league. So Greg Roman, he could very well be a problem, but right now the biggest problem is just the supporting cast. It's Lad McConkey or bust. And outside of that is nobody else. But they do have some staple and foundational pieces. Herbert, obviously, Rashawn Slater, Joe Alt. Then they have Dion Henley, Tarheeb Still, Cam Hart, and then Derwin James and Alohi Gilman. So those are about 8 players that are foundational for them, but they have so many free agents that I'm interested to see what they do in the offseason. Like, we could very well, after the free agency period, say that they either won or they didn't do enough, depending on how much they're willing to spend.
You think Justin Herbert's offensive situation is worse than Josh Allen's?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because of offensive line?
Offensive line, running
James
game.
Cook.
But I feel like the Chargers' running game was good last year.
I also like Joe Brady a lot more than
Not like the Bills. The Bills were like a top 5 rushing attack.
Was that more Cook?
Josh definitely
that was
impacts
like
that.
because of Josh.
You
too?
guys also had volume. Not that there's any overwhelming piece, weapons-wise, wide receiver-wise, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
But Khalil Shakir, he's reliable. Amari Cooper, he wasn't involved in the game, but he's a trustworthy guy if you were to go to him. Curtis Samuel, again, it's just he's an average wide receiver, but he's someone that you can trust in a moment where...
You could say you trust Johnson this year more than Curtis Samuel.
No.
I
think it was just out of necessity.
I think
Johnson's
so. That's
numbers.
the case. Correct.
Because
Johnson is a first-round pick. You needed him to be
Curtis
good.
Samuel really didn't do much this year.
He didn't. But Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman.
Keon Coleman didn't do much this year. He
Both
was hurt.
Well, he
clearly
got
better
hurt,
than
but
Quentin Johnson.
when he was healthy early in the season, Keon was fire.
And Dawson Knox and Kincaid.
He had drop problems early on. Dalton Kincaid was a disappointment
Kincaid-
this
The
year.
Chargers don't have. They were throwing.
Kincaid
He was
would be
throwing to
the
Will
second
Dissly.
best receiving option on the Chargers.
Yeah, like the Chargers. But I understand.
Not saying much. But
Allen doesn't have like a top heavy supporting
doesn't.
cast at
He
all.
doesn't.
But
it
if
just sorry, I was just saying, it just the first month of the season, this dude didn't throw for 200 yards. That's what always just stuck out to me. And then they went to the bye week after that. He got some momentum, and part of that was Ladd also getting on. Although that was like a month after, honestly. But I don't know if it was the bye week that maybe they locked in with Greg Roman and like let's see what works. Because just looking at the numbers, Justin Herbert was like I think 10th or 11th in EPA per play. But he was like close to 18 or 19 in success rate. So like they were having some more explosive plays, but just wasn't as consistent as you'd like to see it. And chicken or the egg, right? Is that the weapons? If you add a couple of more reliable receivers and tight ends, possibly running backs too, can you become a more consistent offense? Yeah. Or is Greg Roman, gonna? Because the thing is like. If Justin Herbert is like 12th in EPA per play for the next 2-3 years, like that's good. But I also think Justin Herbert could be fucking number 1 in EPA per play, right? So it's that healthy balance of we're playing fine, we're doing a job, but there's real upside in this offense too. If you have Herbert, you can have the best offense in football any given year.